Assalamualaikum. We are the Group 1 of Gec103 Bb2 and we are going to tackle about the global food security. Our group will focus on the concept of food security, links between poverty, food security, and human security, and also the key critics of it. As we all know, food is one of the basic needs of human being. Food is very essential because it gives us the energy for us to live our daily life. Food security become one of the most concern of the world as years pass by. Nowadays, over 820 million people in the world are suffering from hunger and the lack of food security. Halimbawa na lang ay ang Africa. Alam naman natin kung gaano nahihirapan ang mga mamamayan sa Africa dahil sa kakulangan nila ng supply sa pagkain o ng pagkakaroon ng nutritious food na safe for them. So, ano nga ba ang food security? Basically, ang food security ay ang seguridad ng pagkakaroon ng pagkain, ang makakain ng tama at makapagbigay ng nutrisyon na kailangan ng ating katawan. There are several definitions of food security but we will focus on the concept provided by the UN. Ito ang the availability at all times of adequate world food supplies of basic foodstuffs to sustain a steady expansion of food consumption and to offset fluctuation in production and prices. This was the first official definition of food security noong 1974 UN World Conference, na kung saan ang food security raw ay ang pagkakaroon ng access na makakuha ng sapat na supply ng pagkain sa lahat ng oras para mapanatili ang isang matatag na pagpapalawak na pag-consume ng food at para mabawi ang pag-iiba-iba ng production at prices o presyo. At dahil sa global food crisis na nangyari noong 1972 to 1973, ang definition ng pagkakaroon ng supply ng pagkain ay talagang naapektuhan. Sa mga panahon na yun, ay nagkaroon ng kakulangan ang lahat sa supply ng mga pangunahing pagkain tulad ng bigas, wheat at iba pa. Dahil dito, nabago ang definition ng food security at malalaman natin sa next reporter.
In 1996, Maxwell mentioned that in subsequent decades, three distinct paradigm shifts took place to significantly influenced the food security discourse in international agenda. First paradigm shift was through the late 1970s and early 1980s, in which the academic and policy discourse on food security witnessed a shift away from the rather limiting focus on food availability and supply as the core concerns of food security. Second paradigm shift highlighted the importance of livelihood security as a key household priority and component of food security, shaping decisions around whether or not to go hungry in the short term. The third shift indicates a move away from a purely calorie counting approach to food security to one that incorporates subjective measures of what it means to be food secure, including access to food that is preferable according to Maxwell. In conclusion, it identifies three main shifts in thinking about food security since the World Food Conference of 1974, from the global and the national to the household and the individual, from a food-first perspective to a livelihood perspective, and from objective indicators to subjective perception. The Food and Agriculture Organization successively revised its definition of food security, and it says, food security exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. The Food and Agriculture Organization of United Nations identifies four key pillars of food security. The first one is availability, the access, utilization, and last is stability. In relation to those three aspects, availability. Food availability means that sufficient quantities of appropriate and quality food is available from domestic production, commercial imports, food assistance, or food reserves on a consistent base. Access. People have adequate income or other resources to access appropriate food domestically through home production, buying in local markets or as exchange, gifts, borrowing, or as food aid. Utilization. People utilize food properly through food storing and processing practices while have sufficient knowledge where they apply nutritional, health, sanitation, socio-cultural, as well as spiritual parameters of food. And last, stability. Stability of food refers to availability of adequate food all the times. Thus, certain that access and utilization of appropriate food is not curtailed by any hindrance, shortages, or by emergencies or sudden crises.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning. So what I am going to discuss now is human security. Human security means protecting fundamental freedoms, freedoms that are the essence of life. It means protecting people from critical and pervasive threats and situations. So human security is sila yung nagpoprotekta at nagsusuporta sa kabuhayan ng tao at buhay ng tao. At isa din sa mga pinupokus nila ay ang kapayapaan, humanitarian policy, human rights, at migration. Human security integrates three freedoms: the freedom from fear, freedom from want, and the freedom from indignity. So the freedom from fear refers to protecting individuals from threats directed at their security and physical integrity and includes various forms of violence that may arise from external states, the acts of a state against its citizens, the acts of one group against others, and the acts of individual against other individuals. So the second one is the freedom from want. Freedom from want refers to the protection of individuals so that they might satisfy their basic needs and the economic, social, and environmental aspects of life and livelihoods. So, safety of individuals and communities. So alam na natin na dumadami na ang mga nangyayaring crime sa ating bansa. So for many people, today's world is an insecure place, full of threats on many fronts, protracted crises, violent conflicts, natural disaster, persistence, poverty, epidemics, and economic downturns impose hardship and undercut prospect for peace, stability, and sustainability development. So itong mga nabanggit ko na to ay ito yung tinutugunan ng mga human security. So, dito na naman tayo sa safety from such chronic threats as hunger, disease, and repression. So, ano ang mga halimbawa ng chronic threats? So, halimbawa ng chronic threats ay ang crime, especially of a serious nature, and terrorism, threatens lives and human well-being and thus human security. Similarly, state, social, and economic problems threaten livelihoods and can cause grievances, while issues like global warming affect the environment, biodiversity, and people. Isa din dito ang hunger, disease, and repression. So, the second one is the protection from sudden and harmful disruption in the patterns of daily life. So, ano yung ibig sabihin ng disruption? Disruption is other term of interruption. When there is disruption or interruption of an event, system, or process, it is prevented from continuing or operating in a normal way. So, kumbaga, ikaw nagde-driver ka papunta sa school nyo or opisina nyo, ay may na-encounter ka sa kalsada na na-accident. So yun na yung disruption mo.
Good day everyone. I am Abdultalib Fatma Zahra and I'm going to talk about the links between poverty, food security, and human security. So because of the links between poverty, food security, and human security is yun yung nagiging evident in the face of food price spikes na yun, in at least two significant ways. First is sudden and sharp increase in food prices. Next is in certain socio-political context. So yung first sudden and sharp increases of food prices is yun ang pinaka-harmful para sa mga poor people because they cannot afford any food kasi nag-increase yung prices of the food. At saka mostly na naapektuhan is yung mga developing countries in Asia and Africa, which is sa Asia at Africa is mostly nandun talaga yung mga developing country like the Philippines. At saka in Asia and Africa is the majority of household na nasuspend nila is 50 to 70% of their monthly income. Imagine like more than half of their monthly income is nagagamit lamang para sa food. At saka sa sudden of facing a food price spikes is in the face of sudden food price spikes, such household become particularly vulnerable to hunger and malnourishment because of the increasing of prices of the food is nagiging vulnerable na yung hunger of the people in the mga poor people at saka yung nagiging malnourished na sila. Moreover, if high food prices are na-sustain, yung other aspect of human security may also suffer. Like, hindi na nag-aaral yung mga bata and yung mga health nila is nakakat off na rin because of they cannot afford food. Nag-work na lang ang mga bata or like teenagers because para maka-afford sila ng food. At saka pala hindi sila ma-plunged deeper into poverty. Second significant way of evident na pag-increase ng food price is the socio-political context. Dahil sa food price spikes is nakaka-fuel ito ng civil unrest na nakaka-form of protest, riots, often violent in nature. Noong 2007 to 2008, international na pag-increase ng food price, which is nakita na nakagising sila ng violent riots, protests in over 30 countries around the world, including Ethiopia, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, Egypt, Morocco, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Pakistan. Not only that, in early 2011, several countries in the Middle East and North Africa is naka-experience sila ng widespread protests and riots na against sa mga rules ng country at saka pag-rise ng food prices were one of the key factor na nag-fuel talaga ng riots at saka protests. So, yun ang pagkaka-connect ng poverty sa food prices at saka human security.
Now we will proceed to key critics of food security. But first, let me define again what is food security. Food security is a concept that aims to ensure that everyone has access to enough food for a healthy and active life. However, there are some critics of this approach, and that's what we will discuss to you. There are two main criticisms of food security, and which are the relations of power that exist within the food system, and the second one is the trade-based approach. The first criticism is mostly pointed out by Patel. He explained that the official food security approach does not sufficiently consider the wider social and political context within which its objectives of eliminating hunger and malnourishment are pursued. So what does it mean? It means that the food security approach only focuses on its main goal, which are eliminating hunger and malnutrition. But the main critics to this is it overlooks the social or political context, or let's say it ignores the social and political context in which the goals of food security are pursued. This means that it doesn't address the question about who controls the productions and distribution of food and how that affects access to food. And that's how the power relation comes. It means that the food security approach ignores or it pays no attention on the power relations characterizing to the food system. It means that there could be a power or control over the food system. And this power that control the decisions on food system may be politically or socially. So we will give you some examples regarding these critiques, and that will be discussed by the next reporter.
Rich farmers and small farmer. To easily understand the critics of food security on relation of power, we can show the example regarding about relation of rich farmer to small farmer. For instance, is the monocropping of crops. Monocropping requires large tracts of lands. In this process, small farmers are often forced off their lands and traditional farming practices and local food systems are disrupted. Kaya, mas nagbe-benefit ang rich farmer and landowners. Usually, the reason kung bakit nawawala ang pagiging landowners ng small farmer ay dahil sa kakulangan sa papel or clear lands titles kaya naagaw sa kanila ng gobyerno ang kanilang lupa. Or minsan din, nabebenta nila ang lupa nila sa maliit na presyo dahil sa kakulangan ng papeles sa titulo ng kanilang lupa. This situation, makikita natin na may control or power and politics kung paano nila i-manipulate ang food system. Just like Patel said, food security is agnostic about production regime, about the social and economic condition under which food ends up on the table. Effects of trade-based approach or solutions. The main effect of bringing agriculture in the WTO was not to reform global agriculture in the line with market rationalities, but to aggravate already existing uneven opportunities in the world food system. Another critic is that the official approach to food security placed too much emphasis on trade and export-oriented agriculture. This is driven by commitment to the right to trade as enshrined in the World Trade Organization regime. The effects this trade-based approach tends to benefit large-scale agribusinesses and rich farmers, while often leading to the displacement of small farmers and disruption of traditional farming practices and local food systems. That's all.